We welcome our viewers to a Citi special today on Ghana's road towards net zero. The energy transition conversation is big globally. COP28 is about wrapping up, and we're taking a head start in Ghana with a discussion around what all of this means for the way we live and move. We have a conversation partnering the Natural Resource Governance Institute, a combination of a project which began by training journalists in covering the energy transition. Thanks for joining us on TV and also on social media. For the next hour and a half, we'll be speaking before a live audience, looking at the nitty-gritties of the energy transition conversation. We have a panel of 5 very interesting people to help us understand Ghana's path towards net zero carbon emissions. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special conversation on Ghana's journey towards net zero carbon emissions. It's also called the energy transition. And today we're looking at the implications, not just for your life, but also on Ghana's ability to raise domestic revenue. As already mentioned, this program is being organized in partnership with the Natural Resource Governance Institute. And we are live at the studio of Citi TV before an audience of journalists with interest in energy transition. They will introduce themselves with a round of applause. I'll be engaging 5 guests on the panel, and my audience will also help me question them for us to come to a meeting of minds on where we are in that journey towards net zero. I have in studio with me the lead consultant for the AGI's Energy Service Center's Climate Action Program for the chemical industry, known as CAPSI, Michael Boateng. Let's welcome him. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
We're also privileged to have an energy analyst and a Yale climate fellow who just returned from COP28 to be on this program. Doris Edem Agbevivi is here with us.
Thank you.
Doris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bernard. How are you too?
Fine, it's good to have you. Thank you for joining us fresh from COP28.
Thank you for pulling me here.
Not to be outdone, we also have a member of the governance team for the Natural Resource Governance Institute, who's been doing some great work in their public interest and accountability committee and other areas around finance within the extractives. Dennis Jair. Dennis, you're welcome.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So Dennis also came back from COP28, and he has a lot of good things to say to us. We'll be joined virtually by 2 other gentlemen who incidentally took part in the training we did for our journalists. So we have Riverson Opong, who's over 14 years experience in oil and gas industry. But Riverson is a director at the Society of Petroleum Engineers. He will join us shortly. You can still clap for him. As will the representative from the Ministry of Energy, who is the Deputy Director for Power, Nuclear and Renewable Energy, and coordinator of the Ghana Nuclear Power Program, Robert Mauko Sogbaji. He's also joining us virtually. So let me start with Doris. Doris, it's good to have you. You just came back from COP28. 2 things. What do you do, and what are your reflections of COP28 as you took part?
Okay, so I am Doris Edem Agbevivi, as he's just said. I work with the Energy Commission of Ghana as a senior officer in energy efficiency. I'm the lead project coordinator for the Energy Commission's Drive Electric Initiative. I'm sure you've heard of it. But I'm also a Yale climate fellow, and it's in all of these capacities that I was at COP to participate in so many deliberations, and as well, I'm back because this year I didn't partake in negotiations, so I just finished shortly, and I'm back in Ghana, and I'm happy to contribute to the conversations here today. Do you want me to just
So it means that COP28 is the last part that they do the negotiations. So the initial part are the conferences and the deliberations. How does it work?
The whole thing is negotiations. There are negotiations going on at the same time as panels in pavilions and everything.
All right.
But when you're in negotiations, it's really hard to be in all of the other places. So when you're in negotiation, you are focused in negotiations and negotiation rooms, and that becomes your day in, day out. You can close that late at 1 a.m. You can close that late at 11 p.m. When you go in as early as 7 a.m. But you have to be following the conversations because these are documents that come out at the end of the day, and you don't want to miss the points in how you're bringing.
And what are they negotiating, by the way?
Oh yeah, they are negotiating in various sectors, from technology, climate in terms of Article 6. You're negotiating financing, they're negotiating. So there are rooms for each negotiation that goes on. And then the final language is what we hear, and we decide to pick a part of it that make noise with that part and say, oh, face down or face out, basically. But these are a lot of negotiations that go on to get to this bottom line that we come into.
Thank you. We'll come to your reflections on COPs, but let me just come to Dennis as well. So you also came back from COP28. What did you do there, and what do you do at NRGI?
Okay, so thanks very much, Ben. So NRGI is an international sort of think tank that believes that the world can transition in a just and fair manner. We previously were working around issues of revenue management, governance, ensuring that governance is robust to the benefit of the people. But the landscape has changed, and our focus now is about 90% on energy transition and ensuring that citizens are not left behind in the transition process. Basically, we were at COP with two reports, one on national oil companies in the transition process and another on what we call risky bets, meaning that countries must not overinvest in petroleum resources using public money to the detriment of their citizens because of all the expectations around the phasing out of fossil fuels, or even phasing down, whichever is more appropriate for our context. And so we launched those two reports. We had a number of panel sessions. In fact, we had the opening press conference at COP, which was sort of addressed by ISD, Carbon Tracker, Chatham House, and NRGI all together. Wow. And since then, we sat on a number of panels. We addressed a number of media events. Okay. And we returned to continue here.
Wonderful. It's great to have you. Yeah. I'll take your reflections on COP. But Michael, you have the longest title in the room. You are the lead consultant for the AGI Energy Service Centers Climate Action Program for the chemical industry. That is crazy. What does that even mean in English?
The AGI Energy Center was set up to help companies move to transition, like what we are talking about today about transition, to transition, have a roadmap towards reducing their emissions. Yeah. Now, we've seen people do that piece and bits and pieces everywhere. AGI set it up in a way that the companies will have a thorough study, thorough analysis of the system that they have, then see where improvements are needed and where we could actually calculate and see this. So we call that science-based target, where we could calculate and see these are the targets that we could do, and then go ahead and implement them. And there have been wonderful solutions over the past few months. This year, the center, for what I have done for the center, or with the center, this year we've done a survey of the chemical industry in Ghana. We've done training on carbon emission accounting and abatement options. We've done also sustainable industrial area training. In many other countries, when we have industrial areas, like somebody is using producing steam for his process. Yeah. Like big companies like Nestle, Unilever, they all use steam, and small companies also. So you produce your steam, that is high pressure, pressurized steam. You use it, the steam that comes up is low pressurized steam. Okay. You pass it to another company that needs that. All right. What comes out is hot water. You pass it to another company that needs that. And when you do that, everybody gets to get whatever they need without, I don't need steam, high pressurized steam, I need hot water. Yeah. I don't need to spend that much money to set up a system for that. And what the Energy Center has is eventually, gradually shift us, transition us step by step towards the net zero.
Wonderful. I think it deserves a round of applause for explaining that interesting concept. So, audience, what I want to explain is we have 5 panelists representing, you can say, 5 sectors. So Michael represents private sector. so that he will deal with opportunities that industry see in an energy transition. So Dennis represents civil society and research, because the NRGI has been doing a lot of research and they represent civil society. Robert, who will join us later on, represents government because he's the Energy Ministry's representative on the panel. And even though he's in Paris, working for government, he's joining us in his capacity as almost like the owner of the energy transition process within the Ministry of Energy. Riverson Opong is joining us as well. And Riverson represents a professional body because he's the director of Professional Society of Engineers. You can't do anything meaningful without the involvement of engineers. And of course, Doris wears a number of hats, Yale, and also Energy Commission with a specific program. So let me introduce Riverson, just to be sure he's the same guy I'm seeing on the screen. Good morning, Riverson. Thanks for joining us. And what are your opening thoughts around the topic?
Thank you so much. Good to see you again. In regards to all your listeners listening from afar, and also Dennis and Doris, good to see you, two of you once again. And I think I'm not the only one who is actually waiting so much to hear about the outcomes of the COP28. It is a global issue. We are talking about the transition of life because people's life will change. People here, I'm talking about the professionals. We've seen companies transitioning, even with their own workers. We've seen the importance of the oil and gas industry, even as of now, in the energy mix. So the word just transition is apparently what I'm looking forward to discussing today. And probably want to go in deeper to understand where we stand in Ghana amidst the global energy portfolio. We are probably going to discuss how other countries are transitioning. And I think most importantly for me, I'm looking at how the impact of our current energy mix is on the global energy transition scheme. I'm also looking forward to discuss going forward how we are going to probably invest windfall revenue from the current oil and gas revenue we have, because we saw countries like Dubai reinvesting the revenue they had from crude oil export, or let me say production, into something greater today. They do not embark so much in the whole just transition, for all, but they also have a plan, because if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail indirectly. But I will end by saying that there are three categories of people. There are people who learn from their own mistakes and avoid them. There are people who learn from others' mistakes, avoid them. And there are people who don't learn from their own mistake and don't learn from anybody's mistake. There are issues to discuss in Ghana. How are we going to make sure that we don't repeat such mistakes whilst we are transitioning? So I'm looking forward for a wonderful time with you.
Thank you, Riverson. We're looking forward to hearing you. Let me come back and talk to Doris. Doris, so after COP28, what were the top 1 or 2 or 3 issues, in your view, in relation to energy transition that you gleaned from the conference?
Thank you, Bernard. So I went to COP in a very huge capacity as a Yale Climate Fellow, because they had to gather most of the fellows to be able to put together a South-South cooperation. The Yale Climate Fellowship is for the South, and we have the Global North and Global South now. Now the Global South is who are on the Yale Climate Fellowship. So on the fellowship, you'd have Indonesia, India, you have China, you have Kenya, you have all of those people. And one of the key things in doing that was we came out with the understanding that to move our transitions forward in the Global South, it will require a South-South cooperation. Not necessarily how we are looking forward to a North-South cooperation, but more of like pushing it in the direction of the South-South cooperation. Let me say from the top of my head an experience with India, Aditya, when I said, we have lithium here in Ghana. India says, okay, we can produce this. The conversation is between Ghana and India. If lithium gets to India, India is supposed to bring us a fixed amount of cars as a result of but that is an example of a South-South cooperation. So much so that we have to ask ourselves, if we don't do that, what other options are there? You'll now be waiting for the North to either come and finance that, and then that becomes a conversation of we're waiting for 100 billion, we're waiting for 100 billion, that takes so long. So it's clear that it has to be a South-South cooperation. That's the top of my list for this one. The second pointer has been the fact that the loss and damage fund, of course, everybody has heard that, has funds in it. We have $700 million at the moment, and that fund is still increasing. But the good thing about that is that out of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the conversations were, oh, this loss and damage fund that we've created is just a mouthpiece thing. It's not going to happen. Now, Dubai decided to take it. The UAE took it and operationalized it by pulling funds into it. They took the lead with their 100 million. And immediately they took the lead, Germany came in with 100 million. Then you see Japan pledging 10 million. You've seen them all pledging on. So that's what UAE showed us the way. That's why they deemed the COP unite, deliver, act, deliver and act, right? So we are uniting the people back because there have been differences on the North and the South, on the oil producing and the non-oil producing. So different perspectives on that. So that's what we saw clearly from the COP. But in addition to that, the UAE did something phenomenal by setting 30 billion aside for renewable move in the global South mainly. If you go to the MENA region, the Middle Eastern region, Africa, you will notice mainly that UAE is the one that is financing a lot of the clean energy project. And that's what Riversi was trying to say, is that taking your windfall money and pushing it where the transition can be going. So that's what we see from UAE. And that's what the 30 billion is going to mean for us somewhere. I don't know where we'll stand in that conversation, but I'm looking forward that we talk about that as well. But the third one will be the varying perspectives on fossil fuel and renewable, which was big in COP. And I'm actually waiting, I mean, as I say this, I'm actually also waiting to see the final plenary of COP to see what language comes out at the end of the day for us to know what we are talking about when it comes to that. But it has been a clear thing in terms of the IEA brought out a 5-pillar for 1.5. So they brought up and said, okay, these are the 5 pillars we need to have to be able to keep the 1.5 alive. One of those pillars is methane reduction, and then increasing renewables, right? But the increase of renewables is supposed to be triple that. That's what the IEA is saying. And then on top of that, the investment in the renewables or in clean energy sector is supposed to be triple that. And if you see what is coming up at COP, yes, you notice most of the global North saying, oh, we have to go purely renewable. And most of the global South saying, we have to be able to balance the conversation. And that is where the balancing of the just transition is coming in place here. And that clearly, although we have about over 100 countries that have signed on to that renewable pledge, now we are saying, we have to look at it from a little bit of different perspective. And some of the Saudis and UAE and some of the Americans are pushing the CCSU, which we know is going to be one of the ways. It's not that, okay, when we bring oil from the ground, we're going to release carbon dioxide. So should we just let it stay, or should we ask ourselves, how can we make sure that we can get it out, but also we can find a way of getting the carbon dioxide back in? And that made the conversation of CCS here in this carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCSU, become a big conversation at COP. So I'll put these three things.
So those are your top three. Yeah. South-South cooperation.
Yes.
Progress on the loss and damage fund. Which,
yes.
I hope the audience will know what it is. Essentially, if you can explain it in one sentence, what loss and damage fund?
It's the fund that is supposed to be looking at the less vulnerable that will be most affected by climate.
So that fund has now been actioned with the 100 million UAE put in and Germany's support. So now it's beyond talk.
It's beyond talk.
And then the third point is about the varying perspectives on fossil fuels and renewables.
Yes.
As another key highlight.
Another key highlight, who we are seeing.
So those are your top three.
Yeah, but I'd like to add 4 on trade. For the first time at COP, a trade house was launched. For the first time, we had a trade day, and trade became a conversation at COP. And that's one of the things I'm trying to say, that as much as we are focused on looking at financing as a way to transition, there's a big role that trade is playing as a game changer. Today, you have Europe coming up with CBAM. CBAM is their own law in telling you about what products come into Europe. And when you bring those products to Europe, you are essentially paying taxes on it if they don't have a sustainable means of production. That also forces you to go back and look at your means of production.
Right.
So trade also becomes a big conversation.
That's your top four.
Yes.
Dennis, you don't have to follow the order of four. What's the most important thing beyond what she said that you gleaned from that event?
Yeah. So Doris really covered a lot of the grounds. So for me, the tripling of renewable energy investments or renewable energy penetration and the doubling of renewable energy efficiency. It means how the systems really perform. Doubling of that. She has already spoken about the loss and damage, so I'm not going to touch on that, but it's a very significant move for countries in the global south in particular. But more importantly for me, many countries are recognizing the need to plan for the transition. So for instance, Uganda launched their energy transition plan there. There was a stock taking of the Nigeria energy transition plan at COP. Ghana did a number of activities around energy transition, including composting and partnerships with all kinds of countries to sort of increase the efficient utilization of natural resources to achieve the energy transition goals. And so for me, those are quite significant. But in addition to that, the increasing commitment to financing renewable energy in particular, and the focus on phase out, phase down. There's a lot of pressure at COP now to put timelines to the phase down conversation. So if you say you want to phase out fossil fuel or coal, let's say oil and gas basically and coal, you should put timelines to it. And there's increasing pressure for countries, the wealthier countries in the global north, to put timelines to it. And the next stage will be for us in the global south to also put timelines to our conversation around extracting coal, oil and gas for our development. And so that's very significant for us to watch as the pressure unfolds.
Thank you, Dennis. Before I come to Michael, I need to mention that Robert Sobaji, Deputy Director, Nuclear and Alternative Energy, Minister of Energy, is joining us. He seems to be in a moving vehicle in Paris. Robert, good morning. Thanks for joining us on this Energy Transition Forum. So, how are you doing, and what are your opening thoughts about what we're doing? You went to COP28, I believe. You were there in Dubai as well.
Yes, please.
What are your quick reflections? What's the most important thing you heard there?
This COP28 is kind of an improvement because of the acceptance of many of the countries on the loss and the loss and damage fund, which was accepted by all, and also the fact that fossil fuel producing country was hosting the COP, and then the discussion on it came to light, and for the fact that they didn't come into conclusion on what is happening to the fossil fuel countries, because I was expecting to hear that alternatively, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Angola, countries with about more than 50% of their GDP relying on fossil fuel, if they are to switch, what is the alternative to replace that economy or that impact on economy, that discussion, and so those are some of the things which I say were a bit of the down, but so far so good. The talks have been good. Especially, I would say Ghana too, its participation has been good.
Wonderful. I'll come back to you when you settle. I know you are in a moving vehicle, so that's not the best. Michael, you were not at COP, but you've heard Doris, you've heard Dennis, you've heard Robert. They all seem to say this is a very important COP and all of that. Was AGI represented there at all? Were you even interested? Or you were discussing import-export levy, so you didn't have time for all those things?
I inquired about that, and I was told that we don't have any representatives there.
No rep of AGI went to COP?
I do not think so.
Wow.
I have to confirm, but the last time I checked, I did not remember anybody went.
But were you interested in the discussions?
Yes.
Were you following the discussions?
We've been following the discussions. There were two things that I have been following personally. Mm-hmm. One was the loss and damage fund that Doris mentioned.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good start. Mm-hmm. They are looking at between $100 and $580 billion. Mm-hmm. And so far, what is available now is about $700 million, and is still rising. It shows us for our transition plan that we are looking for 550 billion, how tough that will be. Now, the other thing that I have followed, I've been watching is the wedding. They've been fighting over the wedding, face out, face down, and I understand both arguments. Doris mentioned that those who have fossil fuels, they are discussing the possibility of storing, capturing the carbon and storing. And is there a technology for that? The answer is yes. Is there appetite for that for most people who don't have fossil fuels? Not very much. But I think that we should not fix one heart for all. We should be flexible and then look at the technology, because there's technology for that. We all don't want fossil fuel, but we can phase it out gently. For us as Ghanaians, I do not think we should toe the lines of the north-north, like she said. We have natural gas that's not expensive, and we have a lot of it in West Africa. In Ghana, we have a lot of natural gas. We should transition using natural gas to do a lot of the issues, a lot of the energy production. Then gradually we go into cheap renewable energy and water to do the hydrogen and the rest. We should just not jump there. 1 kilo of hydrogen is about $4. And when you use natural gas, the hydrogen is less than $2. So it does, for us that we have natural gas, it should not be, it doesn't make sense for us to be jumping to water, green hydrogen, when we can do gray hydrogen.
So you believe in phase down, not phase out?
Yes,
wonderful.
Step by step.
So you've made 2 points. The loss and damage fund was critical, and the language of the transition, and Ghana's particular. So let me end this round with Riverson. Riverson, so again, what were the most important issues, or what are your most important learnings from COP in relation to what we're discussing?
Thank you so much. And I think Dennis, Robert, and Doris mentioned everything. But again, if you remember, Mr. Abele, there was an advert when a woman got some money, and that was through her mobile phone, right? And the daughter came to ask, "Now, mom, in Escanaway." Okay, so that's where I'm going to start from. Where and when is the money coming? I'm very happy with what Dubai is doing, and I think it's a very big learning curve for Africa. Today, Nigeria doesn't want to even talk about energy transition. They don't want to leave their fossil fuels, because how can you leave more than 85% of your country revenue under the ground? Same for Angola. Almost 90% of their total revenue is coming from crude oil export. And for them to move from this kind of situation will require hundreds and even not billions of US dollars to replace the energy security. In terms of, I would say, the money going to come from wherever it's going to be, whether it's the loss and damage fund, or is it going to be a free money, or is it going to be a loan? What will be the impact on the electricity mix in Ghana? And Dr. Sobaji is here, can confirm that, and something that we looked at, and now they're mentioning CCUS. But believe it or not, that's where it's going to. The oil and gas industry is very dynamic, and let me say this. The very first time I made a research on CCUS was 2015, which was published in Thailand, all right? We started CCUS many years ago, but people think that it's something new. It's not anything new. The oil and gas understood that this day will come. In the early days of 2010, we were affected by something called the peak oil concept. So today we are discussing energy transition, but the first hit was the peak oil, and we understood that this kind of attacks would come. So this kind of research began. We were thinking about capturing even not just carbon, but reproducing the crude oil in a particular depleted reserves. And Norway is doing that so well. You mentioned the case of COP coming up with, strongly with, methane emission. Ghana has a, no flaring policy. but today we still flare. So tell me, what are you going to change? And that's what I said earlier on. What are we doing with our initial issues in the energy sector, first of all, before we talk about energy transition? Because we need to couple with whatever money we ourselves in this country can invest. Where do we start from? Because this is not the first time I'm personally hearing about this cost and damage funding. But has Ghana received any money? Maybe Robert can tell us. It came and did he announce it? But I have not heard anything. The last time I checked, US and China are still firing coal. So South Africa stopped coal. What is happening in South Africa now? Doing so, and that's a very practical example. All right. But this is a country that has no reserves in terms of gas and crude oil. They are going to rely on gas coming from Tanzania and probably Mozambique, which would be a good thing. Because last year at COP and even the subsequent year, we realized that instead of stop hydrocarbon entirely, we heard that gas is a transition fuel. So tell me, Mr. Avile, in the case of Ghana, where 55% on average of our electricity mix is coming from gas to power, 95% of our thermal plants are on gas, and we have the rest coming from hydro and some from renewables. What are you transitioning from to? The main issue has to do with the transportation sector in terms of emission. All right, because if we're able to set things right, we will be in the tangent of transitioning, because we started this, as a country way before energy transition became an issue. Because today, the world does not accept hydro as renewable. But I learned in science at the secondary school that hydro is renewable. But today, when you hear renewable, it's wind, it's solar, it's everything else except hydro. But today, Robert is here can tell us that the hydro dams are supporting us by almost 35%. And the rest coming from gas to power, and 3% or so coming from solar. So where should we go to? And I believe Doris will take the mantle when it comes to the downstream, what do you call it, emission.
Wonderful. This is a Citi special brought to you in partnership with the NRGI, Ghana's Journey Towards Net Zero Energy Transition, a big panel discussing before a live audience here at Citi TV. And we're talking about Ghana's journey towards net zero carbon emission. A submission before this break, or before the break we're about to take, came from Reverend Singapong, who's from the Petroleum Society of Professionals, Professional Petroleum Engineers. And he's laid out the issues quite nicely. On the generation side, on the upstream, and then maybe transportation on the downstream. And it seems as if Ghana is already working with a healthy mix. So when we come back, we'll look at what are the specific Ghana issues. What are the Ghana specific issues as far as energy transition is concerned? What are the questions Ghana ought to address? And for that, I'll start with Robert, because he's in charge in a way of the process from the government side on this panel. We'll find out what the most important issues are. Then we'll come to transportation and discuss how quickly we are moving towards EV, because as we speak, there's a big conversation about lithium in Ghana. And lithium is actually part of the value chain for EVs. So it's not just the mining. It's about how do you benefit from the value chain that lithium provides. All of that and more, plus questions from the live audience. Stay with us. Welcome back to a Citi special we are doing in partnership with the NRGI, Ghana's Journey Towards Net Zero Emissions of Carbon, happening at the back of COP28. My panelists, 4 of them were at COP28, and they have lots of things to say. We're talking about the implications of energy transition and Ghana's preparedness at the upstream level. Let me come to Robert. So, what are the key questions that Ghana needs to answer in our journey towards net zero at the upstream level? Robert, if you can hear me. Okay, I seem to be having... Okay, I seem to have lost Robert. You wanted to react, Dennis, to Riverson's point. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Oh, no, just a quick one on the fact that we need to focus on gas and all of that. Yes, it's true. Every country has to make use of the resources available at their disposal. But we don't live in isolation. We live in a global setting where things are moving, different parts are moving at the same time. And so our caution from the risky bet analysis that we've done at NRGI is that an over-focus or over-reliance on fossil fuels and its extraction can leave us locked in with funds that could have been used more efficiently to generate sustainable sources of power for us. And for instance, the gas that he mentioned, we estimated that we are going to be running out of gas, for instance, domestic sources of gas. If more investment doesn't come in, by 2026, we will need to import gas. And you are importing that gas at substantially high prices. And if you look at the calculation of our electricity tariffs, the weighted average cost of gas is one of the biggest drivers. And by the time you bring in that LNG, which is gas that has been condensed and shipped, basically, you are going to be adding to the mix a substantially higher price and then increasing electricity prices. And so it is in the light of some of these, and this is just one example out of many examples that I could go on and cite. And so our caution is that, look, if you have to make use of your resources, look at resources that have a low cost you can extract. The break-even time will not be so much into the future where you run the risk of stranded assets. But then projects that are at high cost, you need to be a bit more conservative about extracting those resources because by the time you extract and bring them into the stream, you are going to have events run out of you and you may run the risk of locking in money that you will not get back.
So let me understand, you're saying that on the issue of power generation,
yes,
we shouldn't be overly fixated on the gas because our reserves are not that many, and overly fixated on the revenues from producing gas and other fossils could deny us money from elsewhere. But which money they just now started putting money in. This, of course, the fund she spoke about is only now that it started being actioned, and we don't know the modalities for the distribution. So what's the basis for your optimism that there will be some money to get by focusing on more sustainable forms of power generation?
I've not even gone into the money from elsewhere yet.
Good.
This is our domestic revenues.
Yes.
We already have money coming from oil. We have money coming, gas, we are basically using it for power.
Yeah.
And it's consuming money. So your Petroleum Revenue Management Act, for instance, makes clean energy investment one of the options. Out of the 12 priority areas that are listed, clean energy investment is one of them. Why are you not looking at investing in that to balance out the equation? For instance, our estimate in the energy transition plan is that we'll have 20% renewable energy by 2070. And we are going to be using gas until 2050s, mid-2050s. That's unrealistic given all the conversations that are going on. If you use your gas, your cheap gas, to produce goods, and Doris spoke about the second, you produce goods and you are exporting to Europe, and they impose a tax on those goods because you are using gas to produce those goods, your goods are going to be more expensive. And so you are going to run the risk of losing out in the global trade. There are so many other disadvantages.
So for you, in terms of power generation,
yes,
where should our focus be?
Our focus should be balanced. We have a lot of renewable energy resources. Solar is there. We can even exploit geothermal.
We have less than 5 megawatts of solar in the whole country.
Yes, but that's because we have not historically invested adequately in that sector. Even the feed-in tariff process was a bit problematic until recently. We haven't encouraged enough investment in that because we think that we want to use gas, we'll continue. Even in Nigeria, that has declared a decade of gas, are still going into EVs. Oando, the local subsidiary of Chevron, just announced at COP that they are going to bring in over 100 buses to start a pilot on EVs. So many of the
So you're saying that, contrary to what Riverson is saying,
yes,
we should be more adventurous in renewables.
Precisely.
And not be too fixated with the revenues we are getting from existing non-renewable power sources.
Yes.
I'll take Riverson's reaction to that in a second. I have Robert back before I come back in studio. Riverson, I noted you were shaking your head quite vigorously. What's your comment?
You see, Dennis, my brother, nobody is preaching against renewables, okay? I'll throw back certain questions back to you. You mentioned geothermal. Do you know the emission that come out from geothermal drilling? Have you done the calculation? There is so much CO2 emitted when you're drilling geothermal than you're drilling even crude oil, okay? You mentioned EVs in Nigeria. Which electricity are they going to use to charge those EVs in Nigeria? You and I have been to Nigeria before. You know the problem there. I believe in sustainable energy, and that's why personally I have an issue with the LGD set, because you can't have that word sustainability in the mix. I believe in EVs, and I mentioned that I had a wonderful ride from Houston to San Antonio on an EV car. No sound, move fast. It was amazing. But energy security issues in developed countries, it's not the same case in Africa. All right. Energy security in Europe is between life and death, because you can't imagine doomsday in winter days. Millions of people will die in Europe if there is doomsday, that our kind of doomsday in Ghana back in Europe, especially in winter. All right. So we're not speaking the same language, but you cannot go and copy someone's policy and come and imply it in a setting that will not work. EVs in Nigeria, at what rate? It's super. I mean, just to reduce the emission of the at the transportation sector. Now, you mentioned gas issues here in this country. In my first delivery, I mentioned that already we have issues in this country in our energy sector, and that's one of them. We have fields that are not being developed that have gas in it. What is the government doing about it? All right. Now, when there was a cut of gas from Russia to Europe, we saw an emergency pipeline being built from Nigeria to the north of Africa to supply gas to Europe. Are you telling that pipeline is useless, or going to be useless in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time? Please, gas is still going to remain very important. Regardless of this argument, all right, I don't fancy it when energy security is not addressing 3 A's, which is the availability of that energy, accessibility of that energy, and affordability of that energy. You keep on talking about this fund available, this fund available. Which fund have you received in this country yet? And which fund is being transferred tomorrow to Ghana to support us? Remember this, any investment that is made in electricity generation, in that same tariff you mentioned, is going to bring an incremental cost of electricity. Let's go back to the economics. Is there?
All right, Riverson.
I'm part of that committee.
Thank you.
Yes.
I love what you are doing. Let me just take a quick question from Robert, and then I'll come in-house. Robert, I hope you're there now. 2070 is the deadline we've given ourselves. Dennis thinks we can transition much quicker to more sustainable. Riverson believes that we have still the bridge of gas from just raw crude and stuff like this, so we should hasten slowly. What does the national plan say, and why 2070 and not 2027?
Okay, thank you. What I'll say is that the national plan seems to protect the economy, seeks to protect the economy of our country, and also make sure that we transition, because you see, the Stone Age did not end due to lack of stones. There are still mountains all over the place. So we are transitioning, but then we have to also make sure that we address energy poverty.
Okay.
There are over 17,000 electric vehicles in the country, both hybrid, pure electric, and all that. And if we don't put that into consideration, we find one thing and we'll run back in at grid infrastructure, grid strengthening, to make sure that we will be able to meet that electricity economy. But if we want to do it by half century, which the world wants every country to go, we will go into serious economic crisis. It means that we have to stop certain things immediately. We have a lot of stranded assets. We need to retrain people to go into different businesses to be able to feed. And we already have a relatively young oil and gas sector. And as Dr. Rebesi also said, we have the carbon capture technology, which we can also introduce and use it in the transitioning process. So the Ghana's plan is kind of encompassing, making sure that we diversify our energy mix. We put in the renewables, we put in the clean nuclear, we make oil and gas clean, and then we make sure that our energy mix is resilient, because energy poverty means that no industrialization and your economy keeps sinking. However, if we say we will not transition, then we will not have access to the green economy. And this African trade we don't know how strong it is now for a trade with Europe and the rest. And they will talk about green products. Green products, if your product is not green, there will be a lot of carbon tax. So these are some of the things which will make our trading very expensive. So our energy transition is looking at a period where we are going to go clean, but make sure that energy security is paramount.
So if I hear Robert correctly, he's towing a middle line between Dennis, who is saying, let's move quickly, and Rivers, who is saying, let's hasten slowly. Let me give the final verdict to Doris on this before I come to Evie. Do you understand the argument at all, what they're arguing about?
Oh, I understand.
And do you have a position on where you tilt anywhere?
Bernard, when you get money,
yes,
at the end of the day, when you get your salary, what do you do with your salary? I have a question to ask. Do you spend and save? Do you do both?
Hey.
Do you spend and you save at the same? No, answer that. Just
what do you mean? No, I spend first.
Do you spend all the money? Or
it depends on how much.
No, do you, no.
It's the journalist you're talking to. So.
No, but do you spend...
They are like, we don't have money, Salim. You should ask him, AGI.
I like that. I like that. But I think what I want to say here, I don't know if you're getting my leaning. I'm leaning towards Robert, to support Robert on this. We are both spending and saving. That is the best and optimal way to go at this point, because we are balancing two things, energy security, and we are also balancing our climate perspectives as a country. So we'd have to be able to play it two at the same time. I'm not disagreeing with Dennis nor Riverson. I'm just saying they're both right, but they have to understand that we do it somewhere in between the two, right? We're not going to do. Let's go to most of the oil producing companies. The person who even put money in the loss and damage fund that we have today is an oil producer.
Yeah.
The UAE is relying on oil. Go to Saudi Arabia. All that they are doing, there's a whole green transition. I don't know if you got the chance to see their green transition hub. It's crazy. But Saudi's main source of income is oil. But they're investing huge in renewables as well. Saudi is the one about to produce a huge amount of green hydrogen and export it to Europe. Now ask yourself, are they not themselves producing oil and gas? But the green hydrogen, they are not even using it themselves. They're using it to get markets around Europe to be able to move this conversation forward. So all I'm saying is our transition plan is just saying we are going to look at today, but we are also going to take care of the future, taking steps towards the future. And to be able to do that is to be able to say that we're using gas as a transitionary fuel, not coal. It's 50% less emissions when it comes to gas as compared to coal. So we are using gas as a transitionary fuel. And in addition to that, we're saying we are diverting into all the other clean measures that we need. And on the loss and damage fund, Riverson, stop going too far. The money hasn't even reached the bank yet. So hold on. The money hasn't reached the bank yet. Thank you.
Let's continue with now the downstream. So I think we're following the discussion in terms of your source of power. But now let's come to the emission from transportation. Doris, where are we with that one? I was reading recently that we have globally, the EV industry is growing pretty fast. I think I'm told 9 to 10% of all cars are EVs. A lot of countries are investing in the research. In Ghana, the discussion is about lithium and how to organize its exploitation and how to be part of the value chain. But just in terms of even the readiness of the market for the EVs, you are in charge of that project at the Energy Commission. Where are we in EVs?
Okay, so...
By the way, electronic vehicles, viewers, electronic vehicles.
Okay,
go ahead.
So, as Riverson tried to say when he started, before energy transition became energy transition plan, we had launched the Drive Electric Initiative. The Drive Electric Initiative was launched in 2019. If you read the 2018 budget back then, the minister said something, Kinofuriata said something very pertinent. He said we need to have productive demand in the system to be able to take our supply. It's not just talking about the supply as you have it today. It's talking about the future. It's talking about ramping up the market and getting things excited. And that's where EVs came in. Because apart from industry, residential, you are also having transportation using EVs on the road. Now, no matter what fuel you are using for a fully electric vehicle, there is no endpoint emission. The tail end emission is zero. So first of all, that's a win. And that's why China, as you stand today, China is the leader when it comes to the EVs around the world. They've actually bypassed everybody now. Norway is nowhere, nobody's anywhere. China is almost producing almost half of the EVs that we are having on the market today. But what is the fuel source of China? They've got coal, they've got renewable, they've got all of it, right? Because when you take a fully electric vehicle, a plug-in hybrid, a fully electric vehicle has no, I wish I brought one of those cars here. It has no even exhaust fume, you know where you're, because there is nothing coming out. So first of all, that is a mission on our roads that we are curbing before we even talk about the fuel that's coming in. So that is where we're looking at in terms of reducing emissions and in terms of what you're bringing in as the fuel to that vehicle. So when we launched the initiative, the idea was to be able to push in terms of getting awareness out there. And for Energy Commission, our main purpose was on the charging stations. If you know clearly, there are no EVs without charging stations. It's like you have your car, you have to go to the fuel station to fuel. So there are no EVs without the charging station to be able to move clearly on that side. So Energy Commission has been pushing the charging station, the charging infrastructure system that we have in Ghana. So far, clearly, we have about 6 charging stations.
Okay.
Kempiski, ANC Mall, 37 station, one somewhere at Medina, and the only DC charger, when I say DC, the direct current charger that we have in the country is at North Kaneshie. That's a 60 kilowatt battery by Ijano. And these are the things we are promoting. So I'm trying to say, whereas the energy transition has clearly stated that we are going to have about, the framework states about 1.4 million jobs, just from the fact that we are going to be pushing new technologies in terms of EV charging, in terms of CCUS and all of that. It already started. So the frameworks are being put in place. Currently, we have done the standards for those EV charging stations because you have to adapt standardization for your country. If we are saying the private sector will be the leader in there. So what we are saying is public-private partnership here. So if the private sector are going to lead in this, then you want to be able to have the rules around it so that they don't just go for profit. So we have standards. We've adopted 49 IEC standards, the International Electrotechnical Committee standards that we have so far. We're writing regulations for charging stations because with this, we put a framework in place for this to be happening, for us to have that revolution going on. Because when we start getting e-buses in the country, which are quite eminent, you know where we are going with that. We need, unlike e-cars, you can actually be on the road for so many days without even having to go to a charging station because you can charge at home. There is an option to charge at home. But for the bus, there is no option for you to charge at home. So there is nothing we can do on our roads when it comes to bus without a charging infrastructure framework. And that's where the Energy Commission comes in to say, let's set this framework right so that we're able to have.
But
so
are you satisfied with the progress within the EV space in Ghana since 2019 under the Drive Electric Initiative? When you look at the 4 years, how satisfied are you that this country seems to be getting there?
I am quite satisfied. When we started in 2019, there was barely not that many EVs on the road in Ghana. You had no company here assembling bikes or assembling EV. We had no charging stations in this country. We had no baseline in this country. There was no incentive for there was no policy in place, no standards, no regulations. So if I'm mentioning all this, I'm saying that I'm satisfied because even when we first submitted the proposal for incentives to the Ministry of Finance through our mother ministry, the Ministry of Energy, that was in 2020. I remember that there was a lady who said, you are reaching so high, you think they're going to give you incentives. That's so high. But today, we have announced incentives for public EVs, right? So it shows you where we are going when we are trying to put the infrastructure and the frameworks in place. So to be honest, I said this at COP during the ZTV Transition International, the high-level framework. I said this, that Ghana has put the things in place, so investment should come in. Because policy is in place now, incentives are in place, regulations are in place. So it's ripe now for us to say investment.
So Ghana is ready for takeoff with investment.
Yes,
policy is in place, incentive is in place.
Yes,
awareness.
Yeah, awareness. I mean, after the first e-mobility conference, though, there have been all of those little conferences that go on which have been around. And currently, there are people assembling bikes. I don't know if any of you know that.
Yes.
I can see your audience shaking their heads. You are the only one who knows. So your audience will go with me to see a couple of them some other time. And so there are those happening with time, right? And you're seeing the charging stations that are coming up, having both hybrid. So you are having solar and you are having the grid as well as both as a backup. So yeah, I'm happy with the transition and I believe we can do better with it.
Final question for this round will go to Michael. What opportunities do you see for industry? Whether it's a quick transition or slow transition, EV. Is AGI looking at cashing in? How excited are you at the transition and what it means for new business?
For existing business, I'll talk about existing business and I'll talk about new business.
Fair enough.
For the existing businesses, what would a factory use in terms of energy? We use energy to run machines. We use energy to power, to get steam. We use energy, and what type of energy do we use? Diesel, natural gas, LPG, electricity. Now, can we move and transition slowly in a way that we save money? For a factory, anytime you transition, you are becoming more competitive at the end of the day. So it's not that all gloom and negative. It's extremely positive for a factory to transition. And it's not only the energy that a factory has to take care to transition. We also have to work on material use. If you have machines in your factory and for one whole week they are idle, you are wasting money. So if you consume 1 ton of raw material and your product is 10% of it, and going forward you consume 1 ton and your product is 150 kilos, then you are seen to be efficient. If you consume 1 ton and your product is 50 kilos and it goes to 20 kilos on and on, you are not efficient. So if you have to save energy, you have to reduce emission, we have to be efficient. But we worked on a company, we did training, and one company said, look, we changed all our lights to LEDs, and at the end of the month, at the end of the year, we saved 954,000 cedis.
Wow.
And this is just light. If you take a factory, there are so many things that we could change to improve. We use motors in factories a lot. We use air compressors. So you can imagine steam line. If you don't insulate the steam line wall, you have leakages, you have heat going out, and then you all those losses money, and then you are also creating more emissions for nothing. And the motors, the air compressors, all those machines, there are newer options, even air conditions. There are better options that save you money. And what I would like to propose is it possible to have a fund? To have a fund that if Bernard has a factory, Bernard doesn't take the money he's running the factory, operating a factory with, to make those changes. And a fund that we don't also access at the interest rate that we do in Ghana, 35, 30, 40, that is a bit difficult for factories. An interest rate about maybe 10%. If we could have a fund like that, we do proper work in doing science-based targets. We do analysis to show that if you change this light with these ones, at the end of the year, you save X amount of money. And from that X amount of money you are saving, you could use part of it to service the loan for the change that you've made. And this, if we did something like this, hotels, schools, hospitals, factories could all access funds to improve. They will access funds to change, to reduce emissions. They will access funds to be more competitive. And well, for me, for a factory, this is one of the things that could be done for existing factories. For new ones, I see a lot of young people here.
Yeah.
For new factories, new projects, there are big projects, there are small ones. So, like the big project, I'll talk about one. But the small ones, there are thousands of projects that could be done for young people that you could go in as an entrepreneur with where we are going with the transition. Now, for young people, for all the big companies, the mines, the factories, they need specific items for what they are processing. And anytime you pick the item from, you are in Accra, and you pick it from Accra, your transportation cost, your emission cost is low. If you pick it from Nigeria, your emission cost is high. And this is what we call, is under what we call scope 3. There are scope 1 emissions, scope 2, scope 3 emission. And for me to reduce my emission, I need to reduce my scope 3 emissions.
Okay.
That means I need my raw material, my packaging, my materials I'm using, I need them close to me.
All right.
And that is where the opportunity is. Supposing we organized and did a study of all the items are going to the mines, the factories, and we publish them for young people to see. Look, if I produce this, X, Y, Z will buy it. There's huge opportunity. For the big project, I'll give you one example. Maersk Line has thousands of ships. Next year, they've announced that they are going to transform a number of ships, about 20 ships, 15 ships. They are transforming them into, they'll be using methanol. Methanol, you can produce methanol with water and cheap electricity. It's very funny. Or you pass electricity through water, you get H and OH, and then you get the hydrogen. With the hydrogen, you can do a lot. You can also take natural gas and do the same thing.
Okay.
Now, Maersk Line is going to use methanol to power their vessels. And there are just 15 vessels. They are using over 500,000 metric tons of methanol. They may not come to Ghana next year, but maybe next 2-3 years, those vessels will be coming to Ghana. So if I was a young Ghanaian and I'm aggressive enough, I could write a business plan, look for funding, and establish a plant here with discussion with Maersk Line, so that Maersk Line, the ships come to Ghana, to Takoradi and Tema, I will supply them with methanol, and they will be using, they will say they'll be using hydrogen. I could start with gray hydrogen from methanol from natural gas, and I could also work on gradually to do the green hydrogen. The opportunities are vast.
Many. Thank you, Michael. We are still here at the Citi Special talking to 5 interesting people on Ghana's journey towards net carbon emission. Before a live studio audience, please give me an applause. Let me know you are still alive. When we come back, we are going to come to the audience. They're going to ask their questions. These are journalists who've gone through some training on writing our energy transitions. And some of our trainers are even on the call. And so you let me know. They trained you last 2 weeks. You're going to question them today. We'll also take your comments online. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're still on energy transition. It's a whole journey of discovery, I tell you. And we have a very interesting panel. Robert Sobaji, Deputy Director for Nuclear and Alternative Energy, Ministry of Energy. He's joining us from Paris. We're very happy with you, Robert. Thank you for taking the time. We notice you're in a room now. Michael Boateng is the AGI Energy Service Center rep from AGI. Michael, thank you for being here. Reverse Nopong is the Director for Society of Petroleum Engineers, Ghana. He's also joining us from another country. Dennis Jirir is from Natural Resource Governance Institute. And Doris Edemak is the project coordinator for the Drive Electric Initiative. She's also a Yale Climate Fellow. So we'll come to our audience and we have some questions. Please go ahead.
I can't hear anything.
My questions go to Madam Agbebivi. Madam, my question has to do with the loss and damage funds. And then what criteria will be agreed for contributing loss and damage, especially as climate impacts are already manifesting across landscapes? Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. We'll take another question from that side.
Okay, my question also goes to Doris. I am Philip Abutiate, and I work with Asasi Radio. So you are particularly interested about the use of electric vehicles, and you are looking at fueling the vehicles. But these vehicles are also manufactured with spare parts, the aluminum, the plastic. So issues about, for instance, the disposal of the plastics, even the manufacture of the aluminum parts. Don't you think, either by commission or omission, we are still liable to causing damage to the environment, and we are contributing, or we are doing what is termed greenwashing if we just focus about the fueling of the vehicles but not the other factors involved?
Thank you. Is it Michael? Philip from Asase. Our third questioner.
Okay, so I'm Judy, and then my question is still addressing to Madam Doris.
Maybe she should do a press conference after the show.
Okay, so I'm still on the loss and damage fund. You've said a whole lot about it, but I want to ask if the fund is going to be a grant or a loan.
Thank you for your questions. We'll take another round of questions, or should I take Doris' answers first? Okay, Doris, let me take your answers since all the three questions are to you. Let's go straight. Someone wants to know the modalities for the loss and damage fund. Philip is talking about greenwashing. And then Judy asked a final question, which you just heard. If you can address them quickly.
Thank you so much for your questions. I like that every question came to me. But now you have to pay me extra for the fact that I asked you so many questions. But I'll start with you on the loss and damage and then add the two loss and damage funds. The loss and damage fund really has to have a scope, governance criteria, and all of that. It's now going to be set, and it's being set, so I don't know to what extent that would be. But what I know clearly is that it's going to be managed by the World Bank. And that management, I don't know if you've ever heard of the green climate funds. The green climate funds like that, to be able to assess the fund, you had to go to a certain accessibility criteria, which has to still be met in this case, right? So it's a matter of making sure that it reaches the people who are less vulnerable, who really need the funds. And that has become a conversation. The reason why the fund is just being funded now. When it was created in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was created an empty fund. We didn't know of mobilization of fund. We didn't know of the operationalization of that fund. So if you go to my LinkedIn, I did put something there and I said UAE has started by being able to mobilize some funds into it. But the real question now becomes the operationalization of the funds and doing it optimally such that it can get to the people who actually need it by setting the criteria that can meet these people. So it's a scope matter and it's a governance matter and it becomes a criteria. So that is going to be able to come out of these conversations. And I believe soon there will be that scope that will be set for it. And whenever it is, I'll be sharing it with Bernard. On whether it's a grant or loan, the UN Commission for Trade, the UNHCR, has been pushing that these funds should go in as grant because we are saying that you're going to go for the most vulnerable who have gone through trauma and all of that conversation. So if you're taking it to them, then make sure that what is reaching them is not something that they have to pay for again. So that conversation is on the table as to what will be decided, as to whether there will be a certain level of it, that would be grant, and a certain level of it, that would be loan, that would be a conversation. But I know the UNHCR pushed very, very hard. The Commission on Trade pushed very hard during COP that this has to be grants. And I'm also of the view that it should be grants and not necessarily loans because these countries are already saddled with huge amounts of loans that they are not even able to pay. They can't even get through the principal, let alone the interest, the interest, let alone the principal. So the conversation becomes that. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that when we get to that side and it's clear on, but I don't know if the world is leaning towards grant, if the World Bank is the one going to manage it. I think it may just be that it might be very small interest, but we'll see how that goes. And then we'll be sharing the information with Bernard to share with you all as and when.
Wonderful.
I love the greenwashing. I love the conversation on greenwashing because I've been on so many panels that we've had this whole greenwashing. And I've said that if you have to take a car and say that to manufacture the car, you use this, you use this, you use this, then we shouldn't use any car on the roads at all. Because the car you're using currently, the ICE for internal combustion engine, the normal car you're using now, using diesel, also has those same parts. What is the emissions there? And what is the emission on the EV? So the conversation becomes a transition to make sure you are reducing your emission. So do a comparative study on both. They both will have to go through a factory process to get this one done and this one done. But then what becomes the emission when they are actually on the road, emitting on the road? That is the conversation we are having here. And I know that even to make solar panels, there are people who go about saying even solar panels, the factories that make these panels, some of them use gas, they use coal. So we want to go all the way to the beginning of it. And if we want to do that, then everything we are using currently, let's go all the way to the beginning of it. What it would show us clearly is that even with that, the emission that you are having on your roads. Because when I say, for instance, that Ghana has 17,600 EVs or 17,660 EVs to be precise, you can't tell me that when I'm saying, oh, emission is 1, you're reducing 1 every time, maybe 1 metric tons per carbon equivalent every time a car is on the road. You can't tell me that, oh, because we have 17,660, you have reduced 17,000 worth of it. Because you don't know the cars on the road. Your emissions can only be calculated by the cars that are on the road that are actually reducing. And that's where we want to shift the conversation to. It's not a greenwashing mechanism. You'd have to use the car yourself to be able to tell that you are not emitting on the road. And that's where I think we should put the conversation to, else we don't ever get anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another round of questions. Please identify yourself and go straight to your question. Okay,
thank you very much. My name is Edem Kujo. I work with Star FM. My first question is to my namesake, Doris, who is also Edem. This is on a lighter note. Please, did you come here with an EV since you spoke it so much on EV? Yeah. But then to my main question, there's been so much conversations on EV. Even recently, there's been an announcement of a new eco-tax, as we are calling it, to help reduce or to tax people who are using cars that are said to be emitting so much climate on the roads. Now, with the introduction of EVs, the question that comes to me is, once we have more EVs on the road, we'll need more electricity. Have we been able to try and find that balance to ensure that at the end of the day, our energy capacity as a country is growing equivalently to accommodate the number of EV cars that are coming into the system? And also with the eco tax, are we not jumping the gun whilst we know that there's, as you are saying, we are now calling for investment into the market and we are going about taxing people when, if we all say we want to move towards EV cars, say next year, we probably will not have the total number of electronic vehicle cars to take over the fossil cars that are around. And then a quick one, please. In all of this, I'm not hearing the conversation of nuclear. I know the Nuclear Regulatory Authority has been doing a lot of work around this. What's the plan of
Robert to address the nuclear question?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. Yes, madam.
Hi, my name is Ilignato. I work with Citi. Mine is on awareness creation, especially when it comes to the EV. What is the target? Is it going to be the non-elitist? Because the elitists will surely know about it. But non-elitist, how are they going to be involved? Is there, the framework is already in progress. Is there a framework going to be for them to also be aware of what's going to happen when it comes to job creation for those out there?
Thank you very much. Another question, sir. Please pass the mic back.
Thank you very much. I'm Prosper Kweku Selassie Akpito. The discussion so far has been on EVs. What about ships and aeroplanes? Okay. What are the plans for them as well?
So other forms of transport except vehicles on the downstream. That's a good question. All right. So I guess we'll take, maybe let me go to Robert first before I come to Doris. Robert, there was a question about nuclear. Somebody, the Star FM reporter says he hasn't heard anything about nuclear. Adam, can you comment on that?
Okay, so first I'll start with the fact that whether we have enough energy to meet our EV demand, our electricity demand when we grow up in EV. So when you take our energy transition, we have a target of hitting 83 gigawatts of installed capacity. Our current installed capacity is just a little bit about about 5.4 gigawatts. So you can imagine how much energy injection we have to bring in. And this includes nuclear. And nuclear, the plan is that we are supposed to get our first nuclear integration by the early 2030s. And this year, we are supposed to identify a vendor country. So you realize that after COP, I've not been home in Accra. I'm still moving around trying to finalize with my vendors to make sure that I come home with a credible vendor with a good financing mechanism. Because nuclear, as you know, has a high initial upfront cost. We are under IMF, and funding such a big project, requires that we need to do some friendly funding, so that our economy will not also suffer the consequences. So nuclear, yes, we have moved with the International Atomic Energy Agency. We've crossed the first milestone. We've established all the necessary bodies. Now we are at a critical. We even have a site, 2 sites, which we are to do the final site assessment characterization, and then Cabinet has given us the go-ahead to acquire those sites, which we are in the process of acquiring. Now the point is, get the vendor, get the money, and start work. By early 2025, we should be able to cut sod and then start construction. So nuclear, and we envisage nuclear to be about 40% of our energy mix by 2070.
Wow.
And so we have to start now, so that we build our infrastructure. Yes, because if we don't have a clean base load, all the targets of renewable that we have, we will not be able to meet all these renewable energy targets, because for now they are intermittent. We don't see that there will be cheap battery storage system. The world is still investigating on the cheap battery storage system. So if we want to really expand on the intermittent solar and wind, then we need to get a good base load, so that when they are not available, strong base loads like nuclear and gas to power will be available to sustain the grid and also to sustain industry, until a point where we have cheaper battery sources that they can store. We cannot, go more than, I would not say we cannot even go more than 10% solar. No. Renewable, yes, will be about 20% renewable, but that includes our large hydros. Because in Ghana, our Renewable Act means that large hydros are part of our hydro system, our renewable energy system. But to expand on it, we need to get a clean base load. Else, we will only produce electricity which will not be sustainable enough for industry. Or we put battery banks, and then they are too expensive for industry to use. And that means that industry will have to relocate. So, yes, so far, the system plan is that upgrading the transmission line, strengthening the distribution lines for EV charging stations, which, we are having this discussion with Energy Commission, PURC, Ministry of Transport, and then ECG. This discussion is going on, and trying to get funds for some feasibility studies to be able to strengthen some loads for the for expansion of EV charging station and get the generation sources. Yeah.
There was a minor question about whether we are just focused on vehicles at the downstream, but I guess I'll leave you, because you are the upstream guy. Doris, there are 3 questions for you. Adam from Star FM wants to know what car you drove here, and then he also asked a substantive question, and then there was a last question on transportation and whether it's just cars. Why not planes and ships?
No, Adam, I didn't drive an EV here, but I sometimes drive an EV, and he has sat in it.
Yeah, I've sat in it.
Patrick is also at the back there. He sat in it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. All he was doing was speeding around and, nearly causing the police to arrest us.
I drove it for 5 minutes.
You just drove it for 5 minutes.
Patrick
minutes. Was just abusing the
EV
rules
car
and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's supposed to get this conversation going, because if you ask people, the private sector, to come in and invest in charging stations, the first thing they ask you is, do we have critical mass? See, they are private sector, they are profit oriented, they want to be able to get it. So this whole thing is demand driven. And that's why when you see we are also contributing towards the awareness creation, which is, I mean, everybody's job. It is your job as well. Once you believe in it, it is the Ministry of Transport's job. It is EPA's job. It's Ministry of Energy. It's everybody's job. I mean, I love when I see ASAP, Benjamin Boachi driving his EV on the road, and he's like a moving, how do I say it, awareness billboard, which I have done several times. Everybody has to get on the awareness bit, because that is where somebody that, as she also asked, the very people that we think, is it only for the elitists? No, it's not for the elitists. But when I drive the EVs, I've taken it to Kokompe, I've had conversations with, because I have to take it to the places where you are finding the mechanics, because they are very more curious about it than even the higher class people, because they want to see, oh, madam, be so much share, it's a battery, it's engine. You see, their excitement is even more than you would. But that is how you get these people all excited about it, because at some point, when we did our baseline study, which you can see on the Energy Commission website, a lot of them were worried about their jobs, thinking that, oh, if EVs come, they don't get a job again. But until they saw the car and realized that, no, the car will still need parts. The car will still need, when my tire goes off, I still go to the vulcanizer to get that done. The car still needs everything. All that is changing is the fuel. Then they go a bit rest assured that, oh, they are not supposedly taking jobs away from us, but they are just transitioning us to get to know something new with the base still remaining. And that is very crucial in this conversation. So we don't leave anyone behind, because it's a transition that is for all, by all, really. That's really critical. So when I park sometimes at a mall, for instance, you come out of the mall, you can't even go to your car. I have to sometimes raise my hand and say, but your car near me, because it's surrounded by people who are very curious and want to be able to see what's in it. They want to see the battery battery can see anyway. You know, they want to see where everything is, and that is awareness creation on the go. That is, and I was on a panel with one of the ministers from Iceland, and he particularly said that the way Iceland transitioned was to get all the private public sector organizations all getting EVs. They were, I mean, critical on the EV fleet. Today, he was talking about how some benefit from using energy-efficient light bulbs. I have companies here in Ghana who, one company has about 32 EV fleets. Yes, all their employees are using EVs around. And do you know why the person kept adding on? Because of the savings. Because the savings were incredible, so he doesn't have to think about that again. But aside that, it is to all translate to us when it comes to the charging infrastructure, to the electricity demand creation. Remember I said the main source of starting this whole thing was to be able to create productive demand in the system. If we're saying we're going to shift to nuclear, bring more on board and keep bringing more, somebody has to use it. There has to be sectors that use it, and that is where this whole conversation is going to. On ships, on airplanes, I'll even say on railways, those investments are really huge. Last time I sat on the panel with the World Bank, they said for even railways, they are expecting about 300 billion in terms of investment for a few railway lines. And the problem has been the fact that we don't even have the lines all set out here. So our kind of investments are going to go beyond just the railway. It has to go deeper to the root of starting the demarcation of the lines, and it's a bit more huge when it comes to the global south for that investment. The ships are still a conversation in progress, even for the north, really. So it's a conversation that will trickle down soon, I believe so.
I want to wrap up, and I want to thank the audience. Please put your hands together for yourselves. I am going to take concluding comments from the panel. And I will start with Riverson. You have been quiet for too long. And so what should we not forget as we journey towards net zero? What are the most important points for you, Riverson?
It's a wonderful discussion so far, and thank you for the invitation. I think what I'll conclude on are basic facts about the understanding that never before has human race faced such a challenging energy outlook. We are facing a very challenging outlook because of rising demand due to population growth and affluency in the economy. And like I always say, by 2050, we expect about 2.5 billion people more than today. Africa is not left out. We have still more than 50% to 50% of the population to give energy to, and talk about transition, or as agreed at the same time, there are scarcity of supply of hydrocarbon and even renewable itself, geopolitical issue, technology issues, and then environment. But for me, I think where we've lacked as a country is the understanding of the importance of industrialization. Today, no country uses coal more than China, and no country has the highest amount of renewable installed capacity than China does today. China understands the importance of industrialization. Today, VACO is not working. How many people, how many engineers have been laid off to today? So the whole energy security or energy sustainability should be addressed with understanding that we are looking for an accessible source of energy that is available in the first place and that is also affordable to meet even the demand on the EVs. Because if I have EV and I cannot charge it because I cannot pay for it, then why do I buy it? I mean, it's simple to use, cost effective, no doubt. It's far cheaper than buying an ICE car in terms of maintenance or even the fuel cost. But it comes with the understanding that we need a sustainable form of energy to kind of operate it. In terms of how the oil and gas industry is evolving, see, the oil and gas industry, like Doris mentioned, no industry understands the importance of energy transition more than the oil and gas industry. And we started long ago, likewise Ghana, looking at all the parameters that I've mentioned before. Today, BP is talking about the fact that they are an energy company. Shell revolved many years ago. Now they're energy company. Saudi Aramco is doing the same thing. They've installed so much in terms of renewables, talk about hydrogen, talk about solar or even wind. They understand the importance of blending. We understand the importance of harmonizing the source of fuel or the electricity mix. But tell me, today as we speak, hydrocarbon factor in the energy mix is more than 70%. Are you going to transition tomorrow or next year? We need time to face them off, even as we accept on the new and cleaner forms of energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riverson. Dennis, you've been quiet for a long time. What are your closing thoughts?
Basically, a few things. Just to clarify that the energy transition is a process, and we all around the table understand that it's a process. It is not to say that you should wake up overnight and change all your systems. That won't happen. The point that NRGI keeps emphasizing is that don't make investments that lock you into one source. You have to evaluate all your options, and that is where energy risk transition planning is really important, and others are planning. Secondly, the point I will make is around mobilizing domestic resources for the transition. Even though there are a lot of funds available globally, we first have to look within. There are certain things we can easily do. For instance, our national oil company, GNPC, has a mining arm, Prestea Sankofa. How are we repurposing that mining subsidiary of GNPC to take advantage of opportunities that are becoming available in the lithium value chain to make GNPC an integrated company? Should we still continue to pump money to GNPC to invest in exploration exclusively? How sustainable, how will GNPC look like, given that others are becoming energy companies? And in fact, we have oil and gas companies that have become fully energy companies. Ørsted is an example in Denmark. And so those examples are there for us to follow. The other thing is really about awareness creation. And I know a question was thrown around that. Dr. Sobaji, as many of you may know, is a nuclear expert. Many of us in this room have our own fears around nuclear energy. I think we need to do a lot more of awareness creation around the various sources of energy that are available to us. Nuclear may be good, but are people comfortable with it? I think just awareness creation can address a lot of those issues. So again, in terms of awareness creation, I think that we have a lot of potential. And we are not operating alone. I think we should compare with what others are doing. I was at the Ugandan pavilion, and they launched a program that looks at having 50% wind and solar by 2030. They are an African country. They are not in Europe. They are not a world power. It is possible. That is where I think that we can be more ambitious. Let us not set targets that make us look like we are not serious. How do you even attract the funding when you are setting targets of 20% by 2070? How will you attract the funding? And I again repeat that energy transition is a process. We must ensure that we do it in a way that does not cause a harm, and we have a term for a triple win. You must ensure that you have it in a way that does not cause harm to your environment, that does not harm your people, and that does not harm your economy. And it's important to balance those ones. But that does not also mean that you should get bogged in on your traditional ways of doing things and not be ready to move or learn. And I think that's really very important in this conversation.
Thank you, Dennis. We'll take Michael's concluding comments.
I have a few things to say. One is taxes. We are competing with blocks all over the world. We are competing with people in West Africa, others in Latin America, in Asia. We should watch out not to emburden industry with taxes and then make us less competitive. That's the first point. Yeah. The second point is that going forward, lithium, the batteries, the EVs, it will be interesting to see them produced here because we have capacity. Everybody thinks we don't. Yes, we do. I've seen young people do fabulous things in Ghana. We have capacity. We should look at producing EVs and the batteries here. I'm for nuclear energy. I agree that we have to do a lot of create more awareness. 100% for nuclear energy is safe. The small modular systems, modular plants are safe, and they can be managed here easily in Ghana. The last point I want to say is that where we are, the transition, everybody, all of us here, everybody has to play a role. People in Ghana, every household, every individual has to see what am I going to do to play my role in this transition.
Thank you. I'll take a final comment from Robert before we end with Doris. Robert, your closing thoughts. Robert, you are muted, so please check it.
Please, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll say energy transition is real. Now, who cause them? Now, developed countries cause them. But we are all suffering from it. We are now trying to develop. So currently, if you want to do energy transition, we also have to be mindful of energy security. That is what everybody is looking at, and that's why we are looking at the just an energy transition. But then we should also consider that trade is also key. That if we don't transition, we may lose some of our trading partners. But in transitioning, we need more than $550 billion to transition, and that is one of the key things. The current financial sector in the world is not fair to developing countries. And if that is the same path that they are going to follow, then I don't think the world will be serious in transitioning, because there should be a special way of causing us to transition away from the normal funding process that we are made to suffer as the developing countries with high interest rates when we look for money. So there should be a new mechanism. And also, we should also stop the ridiculous, I would say, promises that they give at conference of parties meetings. For example, the nuclear industry is trying to triple nuclear by half century. That means that we'll be building 20 nuclear power plants per year. We don't even have the human resource and capacity to do that in the whole world. And that's, it's not realistic. The same way renewable energy also wanted to triple. That means that building 700 megawatts per year only in Africa. Every African country should build about 700 megawatts of solar per year. This is also ridiculous. So sometimes I don't know whether it's a knee-jerk statement or we just throw the numbers out there just to make sure that everybody says that the world, people are making pledges towards the renewable. We should look at all these things that they say at COP and put numbers to it, and then we realize that, no, something is going wrong somewhere. But then I would say that the nuclear part of our energy transition, yes, we still need to give it the support. And I'll tell you that a lot of people in Ghana have heard about nuclear because the energy transition framework went nationwide. In fact, one of the most popularized documents since the time of independence. And anytime we said it, we mentioned nuclear. But yes, that doesn't mean that we've done a lot of publicity, but at least somebody has listened and somebody has heard something that we are going nuclear. And our doors are open. The Ministry of Energy doors, the Ghana Atomic Energy, Nuclear Power Ghana doors are open. Anybody who wants to hear more can walk in there.
All right.
And so we do the advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We'll give the last word to Doris.
Thank you, Bernard. So I would just conclude by saying we have to just find a way to balance our international commitments to the local realities on the ground. And I think that is where our energy transition plan and framework has been able to do that, to be able to balance that. And on that perspective, I would also say I'm for nuclear, and I think our fear of something stems from the lack of knowledge about it and how it can affect that. So I would agree with Dennis on this, that the more we try to create awareness on nuclear, it could help us to bring the public to a space of that. But it's clear that the two things that are going to be pushing this transition are financing and trade. Nobody can tell a country what to do, but if I'm bringing you money, I can tell you what to do. And that is what is happening in the global south. Because if the global north will continue to finance what we do, they will tell you what to do. They will dictate that to you. And in another way, they will dictate it to you through trade. Now, people are trading through blocks. If the European Union has been able to set up a block and write a whole carbon CBAM, right? A whole carbon border adjustment mechanism has been written, and that can affect you. We ask ourselves, what have we done on our block to be able to do that trade alongside? So these are conversations on finance and trade that we need to be able to push forward. But regardless of all of that, the energy transition is for us and by us. It's going to benefit all of us in the end. If we are going to become a place where we become an EV hub, making batteries here, as we're saying with the lithium and all of those conversations need to, and those conversations translate right down to what we are all doing and trying to bring aboard in terms of the charging infrastructure. And so I would at this point, plead with all the private sector who do want to go into this space to also reach out to the Energy Commission and let's work together.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doris from the Energy Commission. She's in the driving seat of the Drive Electric project, also with the Yield Climate Fellowship. Michael from the Boatin from the AGI, Dennis Giro, NRGI, Robert Sobaji from the Ministry of Energy, and of course, Rivers and Opong, Petroleum Society of Professional Engineers. It's been a big discussion about our transition, and a few things are clear. Whether you are focused on upstream or downstream, it's a process that we cannot avoid. And whether you are facing out or facing down, you need finance and trade. And whether you are tilting towards transition or energy security, you need to protect the environment, you need to protect people, you need to protect economies. So the best way to do that is to cooperate South-South, which is the opening statement of our first guest, Doris, which is where I'll leave you with. So I want to thank the team, the journalists here. Put your hands together for yourselves. Hopefully, we will see some very positive stories around energy transition and where we are going, critical stories as well. Thank you to the Natural Resource Governance Initiative or Institute, particularly Patrick Stevenson for steering us and helping us to get this achieved in record time, Dennis and the team as well, and my own team, Ivy, Magdalene, JB, Richard Mensah, and all of those who have helped produce the show. Till we see you next time with another special program. My name is Bernard Able. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.